Hello everybody and welcome to You'll Like 'Em, the podcast where we give recommendations for music, movies, TV shows and lots of other stuff. I'm one of your hosts, Connor, and I'm doing another solo mini episode this week. As you remember in the last one, I gave out a couple recommendations and only took about 20-30 minutes on that. This week I had originally planned on doing a list of all the Pink Floyd albums from worst to best, and originally I'd only planned for that to be about 20 to 30 minutes, but lo and behold, Pink Floyd are my favorite band, so the recording was over 2 hours, and let's say it's safe to say that's not going to be up for tonight. So I decided I would do a quick little thing on some of my favorite musicians. A lot of people who know me might know that I, being a huge music nerd, like to do my own top 100 musician lists. That sounds really sad and lonely and pathetic, but during high school years, man, whenever I wasn't doing homework, I'd be working real hard on those. So I decided I would dig out my a couple of my lists and share what I believe to be my favorite musicians of all time. This week I'm going to talk about some of my favorite singers. I'm not going to do the whole top 100 list, or else that would be another 2-hour long episode. So I'm just going to look at the top 10, share with that with you guys, say if I still feel the same way about this particular order I've come up with, or if I would change it, or if I would take people out, if I would add people in, if I would move people, or if I think that that person's placement is pretty accurate to how I feel about singers and musicians now. So let's get started and look at my top 10 favorite singers. I'm going to specify that I did split this list up into male singers and female singers, as as a singer myself, I take a lot more influence from male singers than female singers, which is not an unusual thing. I know some people who've said that female singers have influenced them as a male singer and vice versa, but I decided just to focus on male singers in this list, and I have a completely different list for female singers, which if we have enough time at the end I might share as well. So number 10 on my singers list is Dan McCafferty from the band Nazareth. If you don't know the band Nazareth by name, you most certainly know a couple of their biggest songs. The first being the song Love Hurts. Everybody knows that one. It's always been played on the FM classic rock stations. And another song of theirs called Hair of the Dog, with the famous chorus of "Now you're messing with a son of a bitch." Big old Dan McCafferty was very well-respected singer in the 70s, like a hard rock metal singer, and has had influence on several metal singers growing up, including a huge fan, Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses. Now, if you're not a fan of Axl Rose like I am, meaning I'm not a fan, then that might put you off, especially sometimes when you hear someone's voice and you hear their influences, you can hear the similarities, and in some cases you can hear a slight emulation by Axl Rose to Dan McCafferty's voice, but Dan McCafferty just had such an iconic 70s hard rock voice to me, with that really high screamy vocal. And he had quite a decent range on him too, as far as high notes go. A good performance would be their song Love Hurts, which was a cover of I believe 60s country song or something like that, and is now the very famous hard rock, classic rock radio staple. And fun fact, if you didn't know, the band Nazareth are actually from Scotland. So there's a little bit of bias in there as far as that goes. But no, I'm a big fan of Nazareth's work. I like Love Hurts, Hair of the Dog. Razzmatazz is one of my favorite songs. Their cover of My White Bicycle is funny, but also just a fun song to listen to. Bad Bad Boy is a good one. I just really like his voice. And as far as those hard rock, heavy metal singers from that time, I definitely think he stood out a bit more against a lot of the other ones with his very unique sound. Number 9 is the great Stevie Wonder. Now, when I was younger, I never really like listened to a lot of R&B, and then when I started to get into it, I started listening to Marvin Gaye, another favorite of mine, Otis Redding, people like that. And I started listening to Stevie Wonder, and it's amazing how effortless he sounds at times with some of the way he sings, like all like the up and down the scales that he does just sounds like he's not even trying, especially in his early days. Once he gets a little older, it sounds like he has to push himself a little more, but like not to the point of many singers nowadays who just sound like many classic singers from like the 60s, 70s, and so on, like just sound like they really need to push their voice to get up there. But Stevie Wonder just blows me away sometimes when I listen to him. His sort of growled technique he does on a lot of high notes with the bum bum like on Mr. Know-It-All. Just an iconic R&B and like rock voice. And it's really hard to emulate a lot of the way his singing styles, and he just has such a lovely voice, and that's just like the thing of it. Moving on, number 8, which is a position I might change for this one just because of how much his voice and music has influenced me, is Peter Gabriel, formerly of Genesis and then often his solo stuff in the 70s and 80s. Peter Gabriel just had a voice that first time I heard when I was back in like middle and high school, I was like, I just didn't know if I liked it all that much. And just as the older I got, like the more his voice just, hits me. He never tries particularly hard to be in the right, in the right pitch or the right key. But just, I never listen to one of his songs and go, wow, that was a terrible fucking performance he gave. Like every time I hear a Peter Gabriel song or song with Peter Gabriel on vocals, I just think how expressive and how emotional he can be at times, and just how his voice suits every song he sings on. That might not necessarily be true in some of his later stuff, or some stuff I might not have listened to as much, but from every song I hear by Peter Gabriel where he sings on, he just seems to perfectly capture the mood of the song, and just his voice is just perfect for every song he sings. And then even in his early Genesis days, like his theatrical style with his of performing, like worked with his style of singing. He would often do like the different voices for quote unquote characters in the song that they were performing, like Battle of Epping Forest, and even like parts off of Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Just he had that voice that was like, he did it for like, put on a different voice for each mood of the song. It was very impressive, and not technically really, but like as someone who does theater and acting, to hear like this theatrical style in vocals and in performance, it's just really cool. And not to mention, he's pretty much like the ultimate progressive rock singer. Like as far as influence goes, he's almost untouchable. Like there's only a couple other singers out there in prog rock who I think ever reach his level, and I have 2 of them on my top 10 list anyway, because I'm the prog guy. But Peter Gabriel, he's done, like, I love his voice. His voice, every time I hear it, it just makes me feel good, and I just adore it. And I've tried and for years and years to like emulate it, and it's so hard. And I understand why, like in the 80s, when a lot of these neo progressive rock bands came out, their singers tried to emulate Gabriel. And you've got Fish, who just sounds a bit choky when he sings it, and Peter Nichols from IQ just sounds like he's doing a parody of Peter Gabriel's voice. But like as far as influence goes, he's almost untouchable, and his iconic voice that spanned past prog rock and even into pop music. So the man is great, and I adore his voice. So I would probably move him higher. Now he'd probably be in my top 5. But I'd need to go and sit down and think about that. Number 7, another prog singer, is Greg Lake from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So the first time I've started to get into like classic rock music when I was in middle school, my dad gave me a bunch of his albums and gave me an Emerson, Lake and Palmer album. And I remember the first time I heard Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I just thought, what a great voice this guy has. What like a nice smooth kind of baritone he has that also can go up to these like high, like shouty, but not like, ooh, that was too harsh, or like, oh gosh, that's a little too high for him. I think he just had such a wonderfully versatile voice in his younger days. Like, if you ever want to hear like a really versatile performance by him, check out Trilogy, the album Trilogy from 1972, 72, I believe 72 or 73. Oh gosh, I feel bad for not remembering. But there's a song on that called Living Sin, and he does this really low voice part like this, and then he does like these higher parts, like I think topping out like upper 4th octave, and it just makes me laugh because it doesn't even sound like the same singer at times. But like, and like he did the harsher stuff. There's a song off of Brain Salad Surgery, one of their best albums, Emerson, Lake and Palmer's best albums. Carnival 9, it was a huge track on the album, like 30 minutes long, but it was split into multiple tracks. And the third part, which was called Third Impression, there was a one note in it where he hits this really like darkened, like harsh note, and it just sounds so good. I'll try and stick it in the video if I can. If not, I'll just look it up. It's right at the beginning of the song. Song's like 9 minutes long, but like in the first like 3 minutes or so, like he does it and it sounds great. It's like Guardians of a Nuclear Dawn, and hits this crazy like harsh note, and then he just goes to this like, let the maps of war be drawn afterwards, and it's just crazy. It makes me like crack up. But even the softer songs like Lucky Man, From the Beginning, Take a Pebble, like his smooth like soothing voice, like almost sounds like he could be singing like lullabies and stuff. And in fact, he wrote a song for his daughter off of one of the Works albums, I think Works Volume 2, which was actually a lullaby for her. And it's he just has a soothing voice that just makes you feel very like, oh, everything's gonna be okay. And that's why I love his voice. It just this beautiful like smooth soothing voice that's just so like pretty, and but then can turn like very like harsh and aggressive at times. And he in his later years before he passed, unfortunately, like his voice darkened a lot, and he lost a bit of that pretty lightness to his voice. But like I probably put him in my top 5 too, just because of how much his voices influenced me too. And so yeah, that's number 7 is Greg Lake. Number 6, my favorite R&B singer of all time, who I first heard his voice, gosh, like early high school, and I just thought he was amazing, absolutely beautiful, powerful, emotional voice. Sam Cooke at number 6. And I knew nothing about him beforehand. I just saw him on a forum listed under the top like 100 singers of all time. I was like, wow, I wonder what this guy sounds like. And I heard his song Wonderful World, not a cover of Louis Armstrong's song, but it goes, I don't know much about history, don't know much about biology, but I do know that I love you, and I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be. And he just has such a lovely voice. And then I heard the song A Change Is Gonna Come, which is dealing with the racism in the United States. And it's just so powerful in his like pleading and like howling and like, this distraught like tone in the song. He's just such a powerful voice. And if you like Journey and Steve Perry, this guy was doing what Steve Perry does way before and way better than Steve Perry ever did or does. So check them out. What a fucking great voice Sam Cooke has. So yeah. Number 5 is Roger Daltrey from The Who. And like I said, he is not at the top of his game anymore now. I've seen The Who live. I saw them in 2008, and he struggled a lot. Although he did rock the what is I consider to be Daltrey's best performance, which is Love Reign O'er Me. He blew it out the park at the performance I saw, which I was really surprised at, because I thought he would struggle on that. But no, he nailed it. But I always liked Daltrey's voice, and The Who was my favorite band for years, since I was like 10, into like middle and high school. Like I loved The Who. They were my favorite. Keith Moon is probably still my favorite drummer of all time, which is why my Twitter handle used to be Keith Moon is God. But Daltrey's voice I always really enjoyed, because he had this like strange baritone but tenorish quality to him. Like he could get really high and really light in his voice, but he also had like this natural like gruffness and like not bassiness, but like deeper quality to his singing. But like he could hit those high notes like fairly easily. And as someone who has like a similar voice, in the sense that I can like sing pretty comfortably in the baritone range, but also well in the tenor range too. It was very much like an influence growing up, being like, oh, I have a kind of similar voice to he does, not exactly the same sounding or anything, but and not, like I said, The Who have been a favorite band of mine for years. And just listening to like Won't Get Fooled Again and that like high note he hits like at the end, Baba O'Reilly, like Love Reign O'er Me, just lots of songs that I've been like, man, I love this guy's voice. Even like Pinball Wizard, like even on my favorite table, he can't be my best. The Savils lead him in, and he just does the rest. He's got a great voice, and like I said, unfortunately, he's lost that nowadays. And like even like in the 80s, like it kind of lessened a little bit. You've gotten that deeper voice, but I'll always have fond memories of watching like The Who like live DVDs, and like watching him as crazy performer, swinging his microphone around and like nailing all those performances. Oh man. But so number 5, Roger Daltrey. Love me some Who. Number 4, my favorite metal singer of all time, Ronnie James Dio. The thing I like about Dio is like metal to me, like you can really just kind of throw it in 2 categories as far as vocals are concerned, and you get gruff like harsh singers, and with like the and like the death growls, and you get like Pantera, which is the you get in and tell you soon and call myself a friend, and then you get like the power metal and like all the Ian Gillan fans out there who want to make their own band, and like Rob Halford and stuff like that, like. And there's a very like select number of those singers that I can get into, like Mikael Åkerfeldt from Opeth. He's very versatile. Devin Townsend, kind of flips between both of those 2 categories. So there is like a small third category where they kind of like can do both, and that's what I liked about Dio. Is Dio could sing really nicely and pretty. And then he could go high, and he also had that rough, nice voice to him. That always impressed me about him. I remember the first time I heard him, my friend bought a Black Sabbath album, and it was Black Sabbath, the best of the Dio years, and we didn't understand what that meant. We listened to it, and we're like, wow, Ozzy sounds really good on this. So like since then, I've heard his voice. Like Heaven and Hell, I thought was wonderful. Neon Nights, like Lonely is the Word. Like all those songs I heard, and I was like, this guy can sing. And then the more I got into them, to him as a singer, like his solo stuff, his work with Rainbow, like all that kind of stuff, I was like, this guy really can fucking wail. And then unfortunately, his passing in like 2009, 2010. It really, I was really upset by that. But I definitely would keep him in my top five. His voice, just I hear it, and I get that mix of yes, oh yes, fuck yeah, and God, I love his voice. So like, it's one that really that hasn't really changed for me. And like my opinion on like metal singers changes all the time. Like I go like, oh mate, this guy can do all this stuff very well, and I'll go back and listen years later, and I'm like, oh, actually this has not aged as well as I thought it has. So Dio's a great singer, and I stick by my opinion that he's probably my favorite metal singer. So on to the top three. Number three, we've got Maca, Paul McCartney from the Beatles. And Sir Paul is my favorite Beatles singer. Like Paul McCartney, he's got a great voice, and like I said, very versatile singer. He just had this very naturally good sounding voice. Remember I had a drum teacher once who I was discussing singers with, and I mentioned that I liked Steve Perry, and this was before I heard Sam Cooke and realized that Steve Perry just stole everything from Sam Cooke. And my drum teacher said, yeah, but he has a voice that sounds like he was taught how to sing. He's like, Paul McCartney had a voice that sounded just naturally good. Like it sounded like he didn't need lessons. He just like started singing, and he just had this naturally good voice. And that's exactly what it's like. Paul McCartney's natural singing voice just sounded good. And even in the like the Wings stuff and that, like he just sounds good. Yes, now he's lost his steam a little bit. A lot of it times it's inevitable, unless you're Stevie Wonder apparently. But like still his timbre, like just pleasant. And as someone who grew up with a father who was a diehard Beatles and Paul McCartney fan, that kind of takes effect on you. And even when I was getting into the Beatles on my own, I just thought John had an unpleasant voice, and the fact that John tried to like constantly make his voice higher than his natural kind of baritone singing voice, it just never hit me as powerfully as Paul did. So Paul McCartney, best singer in the Beatles. Fact. Anyway, number two is Jon Anderson from Yes, the last prog one on here. I hated Jon Anderson's voice when I first heard it too. I thought he sounded like an old man. It's a really weird analogy to make. I thought like I heard Relayer, the album Relayer from 1970. God, was it 74? I think it's 74 or 75. But I heard The Gates of Delirium, and I was like, this guy's got a kind of weird voice. And then by the end of the song, when he's singing the part known as Soon, and he's doing Soon, oh soon the light, I was like, oh, that's why people like Jon Anderson, because he's got a pretty lady's voice. And it's weird. It sounds like he's perpetually singing in falsetto. And he claims he does, and he claims he's like, no, that's just my natural singing voice. And you hear him talk, and it's like, well, yeah, he just does have a very light voice. Like, there's lots of people out there, like Roger Hodgson from Supertramp's got a similar voice. Geddy Lee's got a naturally high voice. Whereas Geddy Lee, in comparing to the other two, is very like, has that kind of more power behind it, where he can hit those really high notes. Jon Anderson just has a very airy and like restrained voice. I mean, he does get up there, and you're like, oh God, how does he get up there? And I think part of the reason his voice is so light and airy that it just sounds like he's going a lot higher than he actually is, because if you actually pitch it on a piano, it's not that high. I'm really sounding like I'm talking shit in Jon Anderson, when actually I think he has one of the most beautiful voices in music. And like it's just this really instantly recognizable voice. Like you'll be listening to like a random song, and it's going, and you're like, God, what am I listening to? And then you just hear Jon Anderson like, ah. And you're like, oh, it's Yes, or Jon Anderson in general. if I'll give some quick recommendations for good performances by him. Fragile has the song Heart the Sunrise, which he does like his very like love comes to you and you follow. My voice is I'm getting sick, so like I'm trying to hit these falsetto notes and I can't do it. And then by the end he's like belting out like near the top of his range these like very emotional and intense passages. Close to the Edge, like I'd say Close to the Edge and You and I off of the album have very stellar performances by Anderson on it. The song Endless Dream off of their 1992 album Talk, not a good album but a pretty fun song. And other one Awaken off of Going for the One. Way too many songs to list. And then even some of his performances, like his solo stuff and his work with Vangelis. The Friends of Mr. Cairo has a really beautiful part at the end that he sounds amazing on. One More Time by off the album, I think Short Stories by Jon Vangelis. Just this really nice, smooth, like airy, like pretty voice. Todd in the Shadows said he had the range of an opera singer, and I mean, he does. He once called himself, Jon Anderson referred to himself as an alto tenor, which doesn't make sense really when you think about it, but okay. It just has a very unique voice, and I still consider it one of the prettiest voices in music. So Jon Anderson at number 2. And we get to number 1, and this is one that, you know, I don't listen to the band as much as I used to. I'll go back and listen to albums that I haven't listened to all the way through. I still love this band a great deal, and this singer will probably never leave my number 1 spot just because of how much I adore him, and that is Freddie Mercury. And this is, you know, he died tragically way too early. Regardless, I would have put him at the top of the list if he was still alive and sucking today. Like, just what a fucking performer, what a fucking incredible voice. His vibrato was just so strong, and I wish I had one as good as him. Just the passion and the love and the intensity that man had in his singing is incredible. And just for the passion for just what he did. The fact that while he was like dying, that he would go into the studio and record probably the best performance he ever did in his life, The Show Must Go On, as a way to, like, you know, say goodbye to his friends and his fans, his loved ones, and just say like, I'm never giving up. You know, I will. You know, I understand that, you know, where I'm headed is the end for me. But as he says, I will face it with a grin, and I'm never giving in. On with the show. It just the man was incredible. And I've heard people in more recent years say like, no, Freddie wasn't as good as you think. You know, you didn't have that great range. Like, he was constantly off key in the studio. They had to do like 20 different takes, and I just don't care. I love the sound of his voice. I love his performances live. The improvs he would do with the audience, they're just amazingly good fun. I've constantly heard people call Freddie Mercury the greatest singer of all time, and just personally, I would agree. I understand there's people out there who might not like Freddie Mercury as a singer, might, you know, not like Queen at all, which I will one day talk about how I think Queen is the greatest band of all time. From just looking at it objectively, if we really do look at it that way, I think that you can consider them the greatest band of all time. But Freddie Mercury was just this larger-than-life voice and personality, and just I've always liked him, and I always will. And it's funny, I tell people that he's my favorite singer all the time, and they always go like, oh, I thought you'd say Peter Gabriel. I thought you'd say, you know, someone else. You know, you hardly ever talk about Freddie Mercury. And just because I don't always go around talking about Freddie Mercury is the greatest singer of all time doesn't mean I don't think that. And you have to also remember, this is not, I wouldn't say, you know, Greg Lake is number 7 of all time in the world. Like, this is just my favorites. Like, I'm just stating my own opinion here. So I'm just going to very quickly tell you my top 10 female singers, and just kind of, tell you why I like them really quick and not take as much time on that, just because I don't want to go too long on this. So number 10, Kate Bush. She's kind of like the female version of Peter Gabriel, like similar kind of music style, very theatrical singing, and they collaborated a lot because they were in a similar music vein, and they worked really well together. Their collaboration, Don't Give Up, is absolutely beautiful and heartbreaking, and she's fantastic on it, as is Peter Gabriel, of course. It doesn't need saying. But she also just had a really crazy, fantastic voice, and I'm actually just really disappointed that she doesn't have a bigger following in the United States. Number 9, Ann Wilson from Heart. Yeah, I grew up, my dad hated Heart. He was like, I never liked Heart. And again, I don't know if it's just because he was from Britain and, American bands, boo. Because he didn't dislike rock bands with female singers. I mean, he liked the Pretenders and stuff like that. And regardless, Ann Wilson's got a great voice. Very powerful voice. Like Alone, that high note she hits on Alone, not the highest one she's ever hit, but just so passionate and fucking powerful. Makes you want to throw your fist up in the air as she hits that note. And like Crazy on You is fucking crazy, as the title would say. So Ann Wilson, absolutely fantastic. Number 8, Florence Welch. First time I actually sat down and listened to Florence and the Machine, I fell in love with Florence Welch's voice. I think she's fantastic. I think she's got a wonderful voice, and I hate the fact that people kind of brush her off as like, this weird kind of indie artist. She's got an incredible voice, like this very expressive and versatile range, and she just sounds great. Like, she's just wonderful. I think she's a great singer. Number 7, Annie Haslam from Renaissance. If you don't know who Renaissance are, they were one of the best prog rock bands from England in the 70s. And Annie Haslam was the female singer for it. They had a male singer who kind of sang backing vocals, and I can't remember his name because no one cared about him. They cared about Annie fucking Haslam going out there, and when they didn't have the guitarist that to play the guitar solo on Ashes Are Burning, she fucking went out there and sang it. She just had this incredible range. Like her soprano range was beautiful, and she could go from like nice kind of sultry low sounds to like these beautiful like soaring high notes, and she just has a really soothing voice as well. Like you hear it and you're just like, I could just kind of chill out to this woman's voice. She's just very lovely sounding voice. Number 6, Christina Aguilera. Now, what separates... I've heard people criticize Christina Aguilera. Todd in the Shadow has argued that Christina Aguilera is a very talented singer, but in comparison to Mariah Carey, which is inevitable, really, he said that it always sounded like a chore for her to do like the... yeah. And I understand what he's saying. But if we were to compare her to Mariah Carey, Christina Aguilera I always felt was a little more tasteful with her singing. I always felt Mariah just knew she had the vocal range and just like to flaunt it the fuck out of it and just be like, hey, look at this whistle range I have. And Christina Aguilera did have the range that she could show off. And I just felt like because it was kind of a chore to her, she ended up becoming a bit more restrained, and then... but she still would show it off, and I actually don't think even it sounds like it's hard for her to like hit those notes. I think she sounds great. Unfortunately, her music kind of sucks now, but still as a voice, she's incredible, and definitely like her better than Mariah Carey. Number 5, Whitney Houston. Come on, do I need to justify it? Do I? I don't think I do. All right, number 4, Tina Turner. Come on, do it again. Do I need to? She is one of the best voices in music. Like, she does have this very unusual voice, this lower kind of darker raspier voice, but she could hit them high notes. Like her performance of Proud Mary. Sorry, John Fogerty, but I think Tina did the better version of Proud Mary. Number 3, Aretha Franklin. You know, they call her. Did they still call her the Queen? Because I think Beyonce's kind of taken that for her. Well, to me, Aretha is not a queen. She's a goddess. She was absolutely incredible. And she is like the queen of R&B and soul. And she just has a voice like no other. I disagree with Rolling Stone magazine saying she is the greatest singer of all time. Especially after I saw her performance at Obama's inauguration in 2008, where she kind of struggled. But you know what? She's fantastic. Definitely top 10 singers of all time. Number 1, I need to kind of think about who that would be. But, you know, Aretha, she's just fantastic. Number 2, Grace Slick. I'm kind of reconsidering this one. I really like Grace Slick's voice. I think she has a very cool voice. It's very unique. But at the same time, she's not very rangy, and her vibrato can kind of be a bit too much for some people. I still love her voice. I think she's got a very expressive voice, and she just sounds really just nice at times. You know, Somebody to Love, you know, is a bit, you know, more intense than, say, White Rabbit or something along those lines. But she just has a really like pleasant voice to me, and I just, you know, she's been a favorite of mine for years, so that's why she's this high. And number 1, more Scottish bias, Annie fucking Lennox from Eurythmics. Holy shit! Can we just talk about the fact that this woman can sound like an opera singer and a man in the same song? What? There must be an angel playing with my heart. Just fucking listen to that and then try and justify to me why she's not one of the best female vocalists of all time, one of the most talented singers of all time. Just fucking period. She does the opera like and she goes from higher than I will ever be able to hit in my life to lower than I'll probably ever be able to hit in my life. Fuck. Annie Lennox, and she could sound beautiful. She could sound haunting. Jennifer off of their Sweet Dreams album is an example of that. Even the song Sweet Dreams, like she does those really like soulful parts in the background, and then the chorus was that like low robotic drone that she has. Just Annie Lennox. Yes, she's from Scotland, and yes, I like Scottish artists who, you know, are successful. But at the same time, she could be from anywhere. She could be from the States. She could be from England, wherever. I would still put her up here. My fucking God. What a talent Annie Lennox is. And, you know, I'll give as she usually does whenever she gets praised, whenever shout out to Dave Stewart, who was the second fiddle in Eurythmics. He did all the music, but Annie got all the credit because it's fucking Annie Lennox. So, That's it for today. I went off a bit longer than I hoped to, 45 minutes. That's still shorter than a full episode. But thank you all for listening. You can find us on SoundCloud at Connor and Josh's You'll Like 'Em podcast. I'm going to try putting up on YouTube soon. I'm running low on time right now, but I shall probably have that up sometime over this weekend. So be on the lookout for that. I'll post that on our Twitter and Facebook pages, and you can check us out there. And the next episode that we put out, I'll probably put the YouTube channel in the description. And for right now, I'm probably just gonna start uploading like the older episodes, just because that would take less time than editing, uploading to SoundCloud, and then uploading to YouTube, so I don't have to be like pressured to get all that stuff up at the same time. But you can also follow us on iTunes, subscribe on there, leave us a rating, share it with your friends. You know, every little helps. You can follow us on Twitter at You'll Like 'Em Pod, and be sure to check out Friends by Default, the podcast that Josh does with our friends Brooks, Zach, and Liam. And you can follow me on Twitter at Connor the Harris, CONORTHHARRIS. And Yaskovich is JBY Films, at JBY Films. And I think that's everything for us today. I also put a link to the Patreon page for Friends by Default and our show. Yeah, next week we will hopefully have a full episode up. We're going to try putting music into the episodes this time. So thank you all for listening. I hope you have. Oh, I'm sure Josh does too, wherever he is. Hope you have a good rest of your day, beginning of your day, end of your day. Have a good weekend, whatever. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.